I sat at home, surrounded by the chaos of textbooks, notes, and my laptop, and tried to write my dissertation. It had been a busy week, and the defense was fast approaching. Despite my best efforts, the work was only half done. My husband, Ethan, who had graduated a year before, tried his best to support me. Although he didn't know chemistry, his moral support was invaluable. He often brought me food, as I lost track of time and completely forgot about food. It was well past midnight, and the house was filled with the sounds of Ethan's snoring. My pre-defense paper was still not ready, and the weight of an unfinished dissertation loomed over me. After adding a few more pages and triple-checking that the file was saved, I finally decided to get some sleep. Mornings are wiser, I reassured myself, climbing into bed and hoping for a fresh perspective. The next day, Ethan gently woke me up, and we had breakfast together. He said a few words of encouragement and then went to work, leaving me alone with the task looming over me. I sat down at my desk again, determined to finish my work. Since the presentation at the university was scheduled for 1:00 p.m., time was slipping away. I focused on completing the main body of my thesis and hastily prepared my presentation. After what seemed like an eternity, I felt a glimmer of satisfaction as I sent the file to print. Glancing at my watch, I realized that I had to hurry. Gathering my things, I prepared to leave. Although the school was not far away, due to the incessant rain, I decided to call a cab. Arriving at the university, I hurried to the assembly hall, my heart pounding frantically. My classmates were already there, some quietly practicing, others nervously glancing around. I greeted them and followed suit, rereading the text and practicing my speech. My name was 6th on the list, which gave me some time to prepare. As each student presented their paper, the atmosphere became more tense and yet encouraging. So far, everyone had successfully defended their papers, and that gave me confidence. However, as my turn approached, a wave of anxiety swept over me. The 5th student left the room, and immediately my name was called out. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the auditorium. The lights seemed brighter and every glance seemed piercing. I turned on my presentation and began my speech, but nerves took over. My hands were shaking, and my words were stumbling. It was a complete disaster. My supervisor, Professor Andrew Smith, stopped me with a polite but firm tone. "We need to revise this," he said. My heart dropped as I left the room. Outside, Olivia, one of my classmates, approached me. I confessed my failure to her, unable to contain my disappointment. Shortly afterward, Ethan called to check on me. His warm voice tried to comfort me, offering to pick me up, but I explained that Professor Smith had asked me to stay. Finished talking, I went back upstairs and waited for the other students to finish their defense. The minutes seemed like hours. Finally, Professor Smith came out of the classroom and called me into his office. I hesitantly entered, holding a printed version of my thesis in my hands. "Let's go through the steps," he began, his tone more measured than before. As he pointed out my mistakes and made suggestions, my insecurity deepened. Each correction felt like another nail in the coffin of my confidence. He must have noticed my growing despair, because he suddenly paused and said, "It is possible to salvage the situation and defend your work in another way." His words hung in the air, filled with ambiguity. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Professor Smith stood up, walked over to me, and placed his hand on my shoulder. His next words shocked me. "What do you think?" The subtle yet disturbing look in his eyes made my stomach rumble. I couldn't believe what was happening. It was like a scene from a movie, something unreal and distant, but unfolding right in front of me. I hesitated, not knowing how to react. The room seemed to close in around me. With no options and desperate to pass the exam, I reluctantly nodded. Professor Smith's demeanor changed as he began to work through the situation, leaving me confused, conflicted, and deeply troubled by what had just happened.